It was well past midnight when, after hours of tossing and turning in bed, I finally decided to get up and get some water. The lights in the living room were still on. Yes, it was that night. My brother Casey had sent Paul over to stay with me for a while. When I learned about his situation, it broke my heart. His wife had been unfaithful, leaving him utterly devastated. Paul, who had been married to the same woman for years, had been blindsided in the worst possible way. Casey's son was also struggling, unable to handle the situation. "Jessica, please take him in. He needs some peace," Casey had pleaded with me. I didn't know Paul very well, but I knew that the reason he was in such a bad place was because of a woman's betrayal. Our family had already gone through so much pain. I'd lost my husband, Jacob, 7 years ago at the age of 60. He passed away suddenly from a heart attack. One moment we were building our dream home, expecting it to be finished in a year. And then, just like that, everything came to an abrupt halt. Jacob's death turned my life upside down, leaving me alone. And for years, I carried this emptiness inside. But lately, the loneliness had been hitting me harder, and tonight was one of those nights. Are you ready? Because this is no ordinary story. It's about blurred lines, emotions spiraling out of control, and the silent confessions waiting to be revealed. Every second of this story might stir something deep within you, emotions you didn't even know were there, pushing boundaries you didn't think existed. If this is the kind of story you've been waiting for, hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. Your support means so much to me. I slowly made my way to the living room, and as I took a few steps, I saw Paul sitting there, watching a romantic movie on TV. At that moment, my main concern was ensuring that Paul found some peace during his stay here. But little did I know, life had other plans. A lot of things were already going wrong, and it would only take one small step, just one, to change everything. Paul turned to me and asked, "Did I wake you up?" His voice held a mixture of uncertainty and a desperate longing for some form of peace. I was standing there in my nightgown, but honestly, that didn't matter. I had never felt more alone than I did right then. "No," I said, offering him a soft smile. "I just came to get some water." The truth was, in that moment, I felt so isolated, I didn't want it to end. Maybe spending a little time with Paul would help make the night feel less empty. Perhaps watching a movie together would give me the sense that there was still some normalcy in my life, that peace was still possible. "Come sit, let's watch it together," Paul said, gesturing to the empty spot beside him on the couch. It wasn't a difficult decision to make. I wanted to spend the night, even if just for a brief moment, surrounded by warmth and meaning. So I sat down next to him. The movie began, but I couldn't concentrate on the scenes. There was something inside me, something I couldn't quite place. Paul's presence, the way this stranger sat beside me, his voice tinged with nervousness. It all felt so different. As the romantic scenes in the movie unfolded, I found myself glancing away from the screen. The couple on the screen, growing closer to each other, reminded me of things I thought I had forgotten. Then, without meaning to, I turned my head slightly, and brushed against Paul's arm. I quickly pulled away. "Sorry," I blurted, panic flashing across my face. "I didn't mean to." Paul was silent for a moment before giving a small nod. "It's okay, don't worry about it," he said. But in that moment, the space between us felt smaller. The movie continued, but nothing felt the same anymore. Neither Paul nor I could find any real peace, even though we were sitting so close. It felt as though the emptiness inside each of us was blocking any connection. I would always remember that night as the beginning of something far more complicated than I could have ever imagined. It was like a signal that everything was about to change. The night had taken an unexpected turn. Sitting on the couch, watching a romantic movie with Paul, I couldn't help but feel drawn to him. Here I was, in my nightgown, so close to another man after being alone for so long. There was a tension building that I couldn't ignore. Paul's presence wasn't providing comfort. Instead, it was making me realize things. Maybe it was because I had been alone for so many years. But sitting so close to another man this way stirred something in me. It was confusing and strange, and I couldn't figure it out. But I definitely felt something for Paul. That night, everything began to become clear. I didn't relax for a second until the movie ended. When it was over, I got up, went to my room, and just sat on my bed for a while. I needed to think, but about what, I wasn't sure. Trying to sleep with all those swirling emotions wasn't like hitting a reset button. I tossed and turned all night, the lack of sleep dragging me into the morning. When the new day came, I decided to sit at the piano, hoping it would help ease the unease inside me. I had been alone for almost 7 years, and every morning I just wanted to feel like things were still normal in some way. The piano felt like an old friend, one that brought me a bit of peace and reminded me of Jacob. As my fingers moved across the keys, I hoped this morning would bring some relief, too. Then I heard a sound outside. A shadow appeared in front of the window. It was Paul, out for an early morning walk around town. At first, I didn't notice him, but as the melody filled the air, he opened the front door and walked in. I kept playing, unaware of his presence, until I caught sight of him standing quietly, watching me. My fingers froze for a second, and that tension inside me rushed back, stronger than ever. But Paul just smiled at me like everything was perfectly normal. "That was beautiful," he said. "Thank you. Honestly, that's the best birthday gift I've ever gotten." For a moment, I felt a rush of excitement when Paul walked in. It was like the room shifted, like we had stepped into a completely different space. Then he said something in a calm, genuine tone that I had never heard from him before. "What I just said, it's true. Watching you, even for just a few minutes, was the best thing I've experienced in a long time. Did you know I turned 40 today?" It didn't take long for me to realize how much those words stirred something in me. I turned my eyes away, trying to balance the emotions that were swirling with the sweetness of his compliment. Right then, for the first time in years, I didn't feel so alone, and I could sense that something was beginning to change. After the excitement of that morning, I found myself looking forward to the evening. Learning that it was Paul's 40th birthday made me want to do something, anything, to make the day feel special, to make it feel normal. An idea came to me, and I turned to him. "It's your birthday today?" I asked. "Well then, let's celebrate. How about we have some wine and cut a cake tonight?" Paul gave me a surprised smile. "Well, if you're suggesting it, I guess tonight might actually turn out to be fun," he said, with a playful glint in his eyes. Then, after a brief pause, he added with a teasing grin, "But there's a catch. You have to play the piano for me again. No getting out of it." Laughing, I tried to shake off some of the nervousness building inside me. "All right," I said, "but only if we open a good bottle of wine and make a proper toast." Even that small exchange left a deeper impression on me than I cared to admit. I could feel the emotions bubbling up, but I pushed them aside, telling myself this was just about making things feel normal for one night. It was just a birthday celebration, that's all. But then Paul said something so casual, yet so startling that it threw me off. He looked at me with that same innocent expression and asked, "How old are you?" "What? Narpatendu?" I froze for a moment. I had always tried to feel younger than my age, but hearing such a candid question caught me off guard. I couldn't help but smile. "Oh, not quite," I said, brushing it off. But it was hard to hide the small spark of excitement his words gave me. Inside, I felt like I was being pulled in two directions, lost between the warmth he was showing me and the whirlwind of emotions I was trying to control. By the time evening came, Paul and I had opened our wine and settled in to celebrate. As we talked, we grew closer. His warmth, the way he listened so attentively, made me feel at ease. There was something between us, a pull, something that grew stronger with every passing moment. Inside, a voice kept telling me to treat. It was around 8:27 when Paul, raising his glass and giving me that playful smile of his, asked with a mischievous gleam in his eyes, "So, when are you going to play something for me? You know you can't get out of it." For a moment, I hesitated, then took a deep breath and replied, "All right, let's do it." I sat at the piano, letting the melody flow through me, hoping it would calm the storm brewing inside. With each note, I felt something shift, like I was being drawn closer to him. Even as I lost myself in the music, there was a comfort in the way he listened, appreciating it like it was the most important thing in the world. What I had thought would be a simple celebration turned into something far more meaningful. It felt like a glimpse of something real, something I hadn't experienced in a long time. My vision blurred as my fingers moved across the keys, each note stirring something inside me, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Paul's voice echoed faintly in my mind, and I felt as if my heart and head were slowly drifting apart. I was so lost in the music, I didn't even realize when it was time to stop. My hands instinctively searched for another melody when suddenly Paul appeared beside me, gently placing his hands over mine. "You're an amazing woman," he said, his voice soft and shaky, "and you play the piano so beautifully." His words echoed in my mind, leaving a strange emptiness behind. His warm hands on mine grounded me, even as my emotions spiraled deeper. "Come on, you're tired," he said softly, his tone reassuring. "Let's sit on the couch for a bit. I've got a surprise for you." With his gentle touch, Paul guided me to the couch. I still couldn't process what was happening, but something about the moment felt profound. When I sat down, my thoughts were still swirling. Then Paul walked back to the piano. I watched as his hands effortlessly moved over the keys, and suddenly he began playing my favorite melody. I recognized it instantly. It was the song I had loved for years, the one that always stirred something deep in me. As he played, my heart raced, and every note brought back memories I wasn't ready to face. I just sat there, listening as the music filled the room, igniting something inside me. After a while, I couldn't just sit there anymore. The melody he played seemed to pull me in, almost calling me. Slowly, I walked toward him, trying to calm the chaos in my chest. When I stood next to him, I didn't know what to do. "You're really good at this," I said, my voice trembling, trying to hide how fast my heart was beating. "And you're playing my favorite song." My words lingered in the air, echoing in the room as my emotions clashed within me. "Who are you, Paul?" I whispered. "You're really getting to me. I've never felt like this before." I was completely overwhelmed, confused, excited, terrified, and happy all at once. Our eyes met, and we were so close I could feel his breath. Looking into his eyes, it felt like I was falling into another world. And just like that, time stopped. The way he looked at me made my heart race, warming me in a way I couldn't describe. In that moment, it felt like we were the only two people in the world. Everything made sense, but in a completely different way. My eyes locked onto his, and for a split second, nothing else mattered. All the confusion, fear, and racing thoughts just disappeared, leaving only Paul and me. His hands rested lightly on my waist, firm enough to ground me, but gentle enough not to push me. My head was spinning, and I couldn't tell if it was the wine or the emotions rushing through me. Without Paul holding me steady, I wasn't sure I'd still be standing. The look in his eyes made me feel even closer to him, and in that moment, his warmth and the sense of safety I felt beside him gave me balance amidst all the chaos. "You need to rest," he said softly, guiding me toward the couch. His words were calming, and the feeling of his hands on my waist both comforted and unsettled me. When I sat down, his hands lingered there a moment longer, and our eyes locked again. I had no idea what to say or how to feel. The warmth of his touch made the night unforgettable, powerful in a way I couldn't quite explain. That night on the couch turned into one of the most thrilling, unforgettable nights of my life. Everything happened so quickly that I barely had time to process it before morning came. When I opened my eyes, I got up and walked toward the living room. The smell of coffee wafted in from the kitchen, pulling me out of my half-asleep state. There he was, Paul, standing in the kitchen shirtless, making coffee. His body, still warm and strong from the night before, was on full display. And me? Well, thinking back to last night sent a strange sensation through my whole body. My nightgown and underwear were still scattered across the floor, and just the memory of it all made me feel nervous, yet excited at the same time. Replaying the night in my head only made me more confused. What was going to happen now? How could I even begin to figure that out? But one thing was clear. There was a connection between us that I had never felt before. This night, this moment, felt like the beginning of something that could change my life forever. Paul turned from the kitchen and looked at me, his eyes soft and his smile warm. There was a silence between us, thick with unspoken words. As I stood there watching him, I tried to figure out what was happening, what I was feeling. Everything was such a mess, and I had no idea what to do next, how to move forward. It was like I was lost in that moment, completely caught up, but at the same time, I could feel something shifting, and I knew there was no stopping it. Standing there as Jessica, all I could feel was a mix of excitement and confusion swirling through me. Since last night, I hadn't been able to make sense of anything. Everything had happened so fast. My clothes were still on the floor, and as I glanced at them, I closed my eyes for a second, shaking my head slightly. Everything was so complicated. I couldn't tell what I was thinking, let alone what I was feeling. I quickly got up and headed for the bathroom. I needed a shower. I needed to clear my head, to step away from the whirlwind of emotions I was drowning in. My nightgown and underwear stayed where they were, and I didn't care about the mess. All I wanted was to lose myself under the stream of hot water, to escape the chaos, even if just for a little while. After a while, I stepped out of the shower, wrapped in a towel, when suddenly the door opened. Paul was standing there. I froze for a moment. Neither of us moved. Our eyes met and held, locked in a gaze so intense it felt like the world stopped spinning. I didn't know what to do. The confusion and emotion in my eyes must have been obvious because I felt completely exposed, vulnerable. And yet, somehow, I couldn't stop the words from rising to the surface, spilling out of me. "I don't even know what's going on," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "What we're doing, I know it's so wrong, but it feels like I'm dreaming." Paul took another step closer to me. His eyes were filled with conflicting emotions. Neither of us knew what would happen next. I wanted to say something, but the words just wouldn't come. "Your coffee's ready," Paul said, his voice a little shaky. As my eyes drifted to him, it hit me how messy, and yet strangely beautiful, everything was. I didn't think about the future. I just lived in the moment. As I sat down with my coffee, the confusion in my heart was still swirling. Sitting with Paul, our eyes locking, remembering what had happened between us. It had all happened so fast, I could barely keep up. What had we done? What did we feel? I wanted to say something to make sense of it all, but finding the right words felt impossible. "Jessica," Paul started, his voice strained. "What we did was so wrong, I know that. Why did we let this happen?" His eyes showed guilt, but there was understanding. He knew, just as I did, that things had spiraled out of control. "We should regret this, shouldn't we? We never should have done it." There was a pause. My thoughts were tangled, but finally I found my voice. "Yeah, maybe it all happened so fast, but no, it wasn't right. We let things get too complicated, and now, looking back, it just feels like none of it makes sense." This was a mistake for both of us. There was a weight on my chest, but also a strange relief in admitting that we had both gone too far. Paul stayed quiet for a moment, staring at the floor. Then he looked up at me. "Let's pretend this never happened," he said, his voice steady but soft. "I think, for both our sakes, we need to leave this behind. What good could come from dragging this on, especially when things are already such a mess? We need space from each other." When he said that, something inside me resonated. He was right. Continuing this would only hurt both of us. "Yeah," I said, taking a deep breath. "Maybe this is for the best. If you leave, maybe that's the solution. It's probably the healthiest choice for both of us." Paul nodded, his expression firm. "I need to do this," he said. "It's the right thing for both of us." We sat in silence for a few seconds, just looking at each other. In that moment, we both realized how important this decision was, accepting that what we had done, those dark moments, was just a mistake. Facing that truth might be the first step toward setting things right. And instead of dragging each other down in such a tangled way, giving each other space felt like the only way forward. I hope you enjoyed my story. It's been such an exciting journey, and sharing it with you has truly made me happy. If you'd like to hear more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you'll be the first to know when a new episode drops. Also, your likes and comments mean the world to me. Hearing your thoughts and feelings really keeps me motivated. Your support helps me so much in creating more. Thank you all so much, and I'll see you in the next story.